Welcome back. Welcome back to Open Your Eyes. We're moving now into our first segment. And this one is all about the rising inflation and what it means for our country. Now, this guy that we've got in, no stranger to us, professor in finance and economics at Nova Southern University. He is none other than Dr. Albert Williams, a son of the soil. Sir, good morning.
Well, good morning to you, John. Good morning, Marlene.
Yes.
Just a small correction, Nova Southeastern University.
Nova Southeastern University. Thank you for the correction, but it's nice
Yeah.
to have you in with us. It's so nice to have you in. We know that this is, of course, one of the things that you like to educate upon, especially here at home in our country. Primarily, the rising inflation. Let's get people's buy-in to this for them to understand what is inflation. So that's the first question. When we say inflation, what are we talking about here? Rising inflation.
Right. John and Marlene, inflation. My first crack at inflation, I was 18 years old at St. John's College, sixth form, and I compared it with a pregnancy. It gets larger and larger, and eventually it will have a beautiful baby. Unfortunately, I was naive at that time. Inflation today doesn't mean that at all. It could get out of hand, and so we don't want it to end up into hyperinflation. But let's talk about inflation. Inflation is something called rise in prices. Now, every month, if you see prices are going up, and you hear I use the keyword prices because it doesn't mean all prices, but most prices. And so inflation just means prices are going up on average on most items. And there's always inflation, but if it's only 1%, 2%, nobody cares. But when it starts to hit 5, 10, 15%, then it really starts to hit your pocket. And that's the problem we're facing now. Globally, inflation has gotten across. So, I should share with you a few data points. I won't be long.
Okay.
So inflation is when you have big price changes, you have big issues. So here are some global numbers. I won't give a lot, but it's important to know. Countries, first of all, the whole world is facing inflation. Here's one. Sudan, 260% increase over last year, April to now. Stop and think about that. Venezuela, 222% increase from last year, April to this year, April. Syria, 139. Then you go to the second tier, not so high. Like Haiti. Haiti is a poor country, but it's experiencing 24% inflation from last year, April to now. That's a lot. Come down to the US and the UK. They're only having, the UK is 9, about 10%, and the US in April was 8%. Now, look at some low ones. China is considered 2% inflation. Bolivia, of all places in South America, is under 1%.
Wow.
Saudi Arabia, this one is important because you know why I'm going there. 2.3%. Taiwan is about 3.3%. And good Belize is 5.8% as reported by the Statistical Institute. So what am I telling you? Inflation is a global phenomenon. All human beings are being affected by it. Once you have to go shopping. And so the World Bank, the IMF said that increase in fuel and food prices are impacting all the countries, but it hits the more vulnerable people in the low-income countries. Now, Belize is not considered low-income, but we do have a very unequal distribution of wealth, and therefore, with 50% of the people more in the poverty area, boy, inflation hits them harder. So, in summary, what I want you to see is that the war, the continue of the pandemic, the recovery, those two things are bad. And if weather were to come in, that's a third one. All those things can impact inflation, causing our prices in Belize to go up.
Now, you said something key. You said
all these things.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying you said something key, that prices naturally will rise over time. If I reflect on what my mother used to tell me cost 5 cents or $1 versus to what I used to pay 50 cents for as a child compared to now, prices change. But it's when it takes these spikes that we start to get a bit concerned. But one clarification here that I think is important. We often talk about inflation and cost of living. How would you explain the difference between the two?
Okay. Cost of living is just the cost that you use to go to your budgets and so on. But if your dollar cannot buy as much as it used to because of inflation, then inflation really reduces the buying power. So I have a good example. You know, when I do these shows, I don't do them in isolation. I talk to my people and lots of people in Belize, and I look at the data. And so I spoke to Mr. Harry Gomez and his wife, Miss Arva, and I spoke to another colleague and friend, Philip Tate, and we churn out these discussions. And an example that Miss Arva gave me was she has a monthly amount to spend on food, and before the month end, the money done.
Yep.
Wow.
Everybody
So-
feel that.
You have to go back to Mr. Harry, the banker, and say, Mr. Banker, I spend your money wisely, but we need to get a little bit more. And that's that's inflation kicking in. Because when you go to the market to buy the callaloo, the tomatoes, and the okras, and all the other foods, even the local foods have gone up. But boy, when you go to the shop and you want to buy the canned foods, and you want to buy all the other things that we like, those things have gone up too. And it's not only because of the local pricing, it's because of the international pricing. When you live in a global economy, look at the shelves. Nothing is wrong with having foreign foods and so on your shelves. We eat sardines, we eat corned beef. Actually, the big one that we like is pigtail.
And those
Pigtail
prices.
gone up nearly 60%.
That's
so I
right.
don't know who could eat pigtail now.
I think boil up will soon become a delicacy.
Yeah.
Well, what happened, Marlene, is that when you order one pigtail meal, when you used to get 3-piece, you only get 2-piece.
Two piece now, or maybe 1.5.
Exactly, John. And so that's how it's fitting in. The housewives are complaining because they can't stretch the money anymore. I mean, these are what, you know, everybody's an economist. They have to learn how to manage the money, and especially when you don't have much, boy, you watch it carefully, don't you?
Yeah.
But
You-
Doc, so in situations like this, and because you know, especially primarily here at home, it has become one of the political wars, whereby one is saying, hey, we're trying to streamline things, the next one is saying, hey, but you said so and so and so. Let's put it in the perspective of families and try to show them or teach them what to do and what not to do in cases like this, whereby we're seeing rising in inflation across the world. What do we do as a household here in Belize?
Well, you know, John, I got some pointers. Let me get them for you, because that's such an important question. You know, because I do money management also along with economics, it's such a good marriage, right? Because at the end of the day, it's how it impacts people's pocket. So like I said with my family, Arva and Harry, the point of the story is that you have a budget. So you need to sit down and look at the budget and see what that is. So the budget is going to be, say you have so much, $500 for food, and you have to be able to, sorry, my phone is ringing. You know, life is funny about those technology, but I hope it stops. All right, the food budget. So here's something about a budget. The biggest item of budget is living expenses of a house
Yes.
or rent. There's not much you could do with a mortgage, can you?
No.
Nope.
There's not much you could do with rent unless you move, and that's not very easy to do. It takes about 30 to 40% of your income. If you're poor, boy, you got to live, so that you don't have much cushion. So the first thing is you look at the rent, you can't do much about that. But the food is the one that I think we might be able to make some inroads. So even though you have the distinction between foreign and local, even if local goes up, local foods might be a little bit cheaper sometimes. Now, you guys know that if you buy a can of corned beef, a tin of corned beef, you could stretch it sometimes with a whole bunch of rice, right?
Yeah.
But the point of that story is that you have to know to see how you could make the money stretch to make it feed your family. So you have to worry about the cost of food, and you have to look at all these prices. I'll see what government needs to do also, but the other one is look at your light and water. Fortunately, those haven't gone up too high, but turn off the fan when you're not using it. Turn off the lights when you're not using it. Unplug things that are burning up electricity. So you have to be a shrewd consumer now as a family. So when the parents tell the children, turn off the fan or turn off the TV and not watching it, that's a valid recommendation, you know?
Yeah.
You agree, John?
I agree with
he
you strongly.
is shaking his head
I'm
here,
shaking
trust
my head
me.
because my house,
Everything left on, right? Everything left on, and we have to stop that left on thing.
But
Yeah.
Doc, we're also at the with the onset of technology. Everybody has something in their household whereby you must plug in, and and so to consume a lot of energy. That's what we're seeing at this particular point.
Yeah. Now the fortunate thing is that some of the small technologies not take that much electricity, like the phone and so on. That's nothing much to talk about. Air condition is one that you got to be careful, and all consumers know that air condition is nothing to play with. That draws a lot of energy, right?
Yes.
All right. The next one is if you got a vehicle. The vehicle is something that families, a lot of Belizeans own one, some of them own two cars. The first thing is you got to keep the car and the vehicle in good shape, good tire, pump them up. The next one is, this is the one that we don't like, but we need to follow the speed limit and you'll save money.
How does that work? You
If
burn
you
less
drive
gas?
55, because the law says drive 55, you will get more miles per gallon on the car than if you drive 70, 80, which is illegal. But I'm not being naive. I know people drive fast, no?
Yes. Yes.
So I know that if so if you have the traffic guys out there stopping people, they're helping with inflation too.
Yeah.
There you
should
go.
understand
So we
that.
can
You never thought about that,
we
did
can
you?
be safe and save money.
Exactly.
I like that.
And so the next thing is you don't use the car every 2 minutes. Every day you run out 3 trips a day, man. Stop that. Drive the car once a week for groceries if you can, and only use it when you need to. So you have to hunker down in the storm of inflation. That's what I'm telling you. Now here's the one that nobody likes. No luxury item in a hard time. Not go buy no fancy this or fancy that. Right now, man, hold on to your money and stretch it. So not go buy too much expensive clothes right now. Big parties, not a good idea right now either. Why would you want to make a big party when you're not even sure if you have money for food next month? You
Yeah.
see, I'm telling you to rethink how you live your life, and lifestyle is something that we don't like change. You all agree with that, right?
Yeah,
That
we
is
do.
true.
We do.
That
we do.
is true.
Lifestyle. So the other one I like is small things, but grow your vegetable. Half of Belize is rural. Man, I cannot accept a rural family. I hope they're listening to me now. That you can't live in a farm and all you got a pretty yard with grass. You better plant some tomatoes and some cabbage and some okra and some string beans and something else in that pretty yard. What do you say?
Yeah.
Factual, I did with you. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even have to be only rural. It could be urban. There are urban gardens across the country as well. And these things aren't hard to plant, especially high value crops like sweet pepper, tomato, pepper, and stuff like that. It's easy.
Easy. And John, I like that idea because urban farming in the United States is becoming a big deal. You have open lots, people go in and they use them. And here they have a lot of help from government. So if you have a white bucket and you get some dirt, put it in, plant on tomatoes. That tomato might bring 5 pounds of tomatoes. One of the items that went up really high that hit me was tomatoes. I can't believe tomatoes went up from year to year 124%, meaning it nearly more than double in price. That happens sometimes with vegetables, but we need to have the local produce in such supply that you don't have the high price. By the way, the inflation is also an issue. The inflation 101 is the imbalance between supply and demand for all goods and services. And when you get impacted by these foreign forces like pandemic and the war, then you can understand. You understand what's driving it. So grow your food. Make sure you have all of these good things, and you still have to live. You have to keep on trying. That's one of the phrases I got from my good friend Philip Pitt. You keep trying. You do not sit in there and say, well, it's the end of it. But you got to keep tabs on your costs. You got to keep tabs on what the government is doing. Government has one of the biggest roles. Whenever there's an emergency or there is a tragedy or any kinds of things in the world, who do we turn to first? Government for leadership, right?
Yeah.
So guess what? The president over here met with his economic council and all the best brain of the United States and put them in a room and said, look here, you tell me how we will solve this inflation problem other than throwing it to the Federal Reserve Bank. So likewise, our Prime Minister of Belize and his learned team, they need to get together and in blue, red, green, whatever group, and start to dissect what can be done to deal with the local scene. People throw their hand up in the air and say, well, the prices were because of foreign fuel prices and foreign everything. that you can't do anything at home, and you sure can do some things at home by keeping the local goods. Man, eat more corn, eat more local goods. You might have a cheaper way and more affordable. So, Marlene,
I'd love to press on that one a bit. I'd love to press on that one a bit because I think the question of inflation and rising costs of goods has been posed to many of our leaders so far, and very often the response is exactly what you said. We're looking at skyrocketing fuel prices. I know you just explained the situation in the United States where there was panic when you hit a record high. I think it was a 40-year high in your inflation rates.
Exactly.
So people were concerned about rising prices, and that, of course, has a trickle down on us. How much do we blame the global scene, and how much accountability do we have locally?
Okay, here is how we have to look at Belize. Belize is not isolated as people would like to think. Think about this morning, everybody is out there listening to us and they're having breakfast. All right, coffee. I have my coffee here.
Yes.
Most coffee is not grown in Belize. We have a few people growing coffee. Coffee is from all over the world. So the foreign prices of coffee impact local price, and coffee not cheap. I don't know about you guys over there, but coffee not cheap, right?
Nope.
All right. So you get up, you have your breakfast. You say you want some toast. Toast is flour. Flour comes from wheat, and wheat is a global commodity. And the war in Ukraine, people don't link it, but Ukraine and Russia, both of them are suffering. Their GDPs are going down because of throwing bombs at each other, which is another story.
Yeah.
And so when their GDP go down, they're not planting wheat, they're not producing things. So they impact the wheat market, the grain market, and so we have to consider that wheat prices that come in to the flour mill will be higher, and so then bread prices have to go up. I know we had a big deal with the 16-ounce bread the last week or two, right? And the challenge with that is that they held on to that price, but all the other breads, whole wheat and all the other ones, gone up. So you hold on to the white bread, which is, by the way, for the record, the white bread is not as nutritious as the whole wheat, but the whole wheat went up and they held on to the white bread because it's only carbohydrates and it gives you calories, you know?
Yeah.
So you see the global world, and people like to hit the global market, but you have to see it in a global context.
Yeah.
If you go to our stores, my goodness, 90+% of the items in that store are all foreign. I'm not endorsing we're not supposed to promote local. I want more things to be done in Belize, but the reality is we have not done a super job of changing it around. I'm not sure how much we can change, but there are inroads we are making, but we still have more to go to do more local manufacturing. The one with the carrots the other day was embarrassing. You have so many thousand pounds of carrots sitting around, and the farmers were saying, wait a minute, I got carrots, why can't I sell it? Well, that's a marketing problem. I was in marketing in my younger days in the marketing board. The issue is to get it from the supplier to the consumer. That's a logistical issue, right? So you see, we got to see inflation in the context of a global setting. That doesn't ease the pain. It just makes you understand that this is bigger than Belize. And so what can we do locally to ease the pain? I have another statement that I like to make.
Yes.
Inflation don't need any passport.
Well, you know, I'm so glad you put it into perspective, because some of it it's inescapable. When you talk about wheat prices, the conflict in Russia and Ukraine, that has a direct impact. Fuel prices, I noticed you made a point of talking about Saudi Arabia, for example. All of these things have a trickle-down effect. But, you know, we had the Minister of Agriculture, I think, last week, and one of the things I reminded him when there was that active campaign by Belize, Build Belize. It really summed up kind of the trajectory where we need to go. But not all goods are manufactured locally. And at the same time, manufacturers are concerned about the cost of manufacturing in Belize. Let's talk about some of the ways that there can be local initiatives to reduce the impact of inflation on the population.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start. First of all, inflation is for all of us to deal with. So the household has to hunker down, figure out how to stretch the dollar. Then we move to businesses. businesses need to also, they are heavily influenced by the foreign prices, the inputs. So Harry has a little farm and he has a tractor, he has to bush hog. When he has to bush hog, he has to put diesel in the machine.
Yep.
So he has to pay those high prices over $13 a gallon.
Yeah.
So he says that he's not starting that tractor until he's really ready to bush hog. There's no fooling around. So once that driver gets on, it's work, work, work. Because if you leave it running for 15, 20 minutes, you are wasting fuel. So
Yes.
you have to consider the cost of fuel. By the way, fuel impacts everything. Yeah, that's a general statement that's hard to refute. So if you think about everything that we do, fuel has something to do with it. Even services, there's a fuel cost. So the local businesses are begging for some kind of help. And you know, when they use the word help, it's from government to subsidize, don't tax the fuel as high. I've always said that in my younger days as an economist in Belize, that fuel is the energy source of manufacturing. So you would like to lay low a little bit on the tax. The Canadians have special dye that they put in the fuel to say farmers and different people, farmers especially, that they will get a subsidy on the fuel. So do we want to go that route? The answer is yes. We do have some tax benefits for producers. So we need to help the producers to keep the cost down so then they could transfer the prices and not make them too high. Now, one of the challenge government has, and I'll bring it back to government as well as the business also has the ethical responsibility to not overcharge. It's price gouging. You know that wonderful phrase?
Yeah.
And also the government has to be the watchdog to the businesses to say, look, man, I believe you're charging too much to our consumers. So even though on one hand, the minister wants people to make more money, he's my good friend, and he was a student of mine a long time ago at the College of Agriculture. But what I want to say is that let's talk about the beef.
Yes.
Every farmer is so happy that they're getting such a good price for beef on the hoof to Guatemala and to Mexico. But it has a negative impact in Belize. Beef was an expensive item, and now it is more expensive if you have to buy it in the supermarket. You guys agree with that?
Yes,
sir.
yes. I'm interested
And
to
so
hear your
beef is
thoughts on
becoming a
this one.
luxury good, and that should not be. We should have regular Belizeans could eat beef once a week or maybe once every 2 weeks. But the price is too high, and it's a tough call because the farmers are making money.
Yeah.
In fact, if you look at the numbers, it's better to sell the beef on the hoof to Guatemala or to Mexico than to butcher it in Belize. The profit to the butcher is not as big as it used to be, but they still butcher some.
Yeah.
And they used to make maybe $500, they might make $200, so they still make a profit.
Yes.
So this is the other challenge of when you have. By the way,
Should there
the
be
beef is not the
controls
first
in place,
example
though?
of this. Sorry, did you say something?
I was going to say, should there be controls in this? This was a highly controversial one because it wasn't a matter of shortage. It's just the producers selling
decide, yeah.
to where they got the better price, and that was not
Exactly.
locally.
By the way, what I was going to say, which is relevant to this, is that we've been living this for years with the lobster and with the mahogany. I hope you recognize that.
Yeah.
A lot of local people can't eat lobster. It's too expensive.
That's true. That's true.
So if you stop and think that anything that we export and we get such a great price for, the locals have trouble to get it at a good price because the water price is so much higher. So Guatemala and Mexico are paying $2.15 on the hoof. Boy, that's a heck of a good price per pound.
Yeah.
And that really, nobody wants to sell locally because they could get so much with less trouble, by the way, because they only put it in a truck and you get your money. The other one, you got to round up, take it to the slaughterhouse, do a lot of work, and then freeze it, and a whole lot more process.
Interesting.
That does not imply that we should not eat beef. It implies that there are some different incentives that need to be put in place.
Well, Doc, it seems like the logic is actually because the farmers were actually in the red. And so for them to be selling live weight rather than dressed weight, they're making much more money on live weight to eventually export to Mexico or to Guatemala, which both countries are actually fighting for our beef.
Yeah.
And so therefore it's who have the most money to purchase. And then that is the reason why we're actually getting higher prices here at home, because we don't have enough when it comes to getting dressed with.
We-
It's too expensive.
Yeah. So John, you know, being an economist in a free market, which is not necessarily a free market, when there's high demand, prices will go up, right?
Of
Yeah.
course, yeah.
And the problem, though, is that that does not. You see, when economics and politics and
Yes.
they don't always go together because
Yes.
politics is people. People want beef, and people want beef at a reasonable price. But at the same time, if the market our neighbors are buying it at a much higher price, and the farmer looks at both of them. By the way, the farmer, he doesn't usually go to the market. He sells it to the butcher.
To the butcher.
He doesn't like to be standing there cutting meat. He likes to watch the cows run around and feed them and so on. So at the end of the day, he's happy to sell it $2.15 a pound on the hoof and let the other guy take it and do whatever he wants with it.
Yeah.
But the point, though, is that we do have inflated prices for beef, and so beef now becomes a little bit more expensive for the
Yeah.
Belizean consumer.
I-
I'll throw in one more because I know we're
Yes.
getting down. This topic of inflation is very interesting, but very appropriate. And this discussion is going on in every country in the world.
Yeah.
I had my 2 interviews with NBC about a couple of weeks ago, and this is a topic that is very relevant to all
Everybody
people in the
across
world.
the world. But for us, where we know the economic challenges that people are living in, you know, the census is rolling out, but we know that it's definitely more than half the population that's living below the poverty line. They'll feel
Yeah.
it a lot differently. And you said something interesting, which is it's going to be a while before things get better. Can we put that into perspective?
Yes, I'm so happy that you brought that up. Now, let me tell you, all the gurus of the best brain in the world are guessing.
Really?
John, it sounds stupid because I'm saying so simple. But let me tell you, we were all watching inflation last year, and we're watching it, it's going up. And I said, well, keep an eye on it, keep an eye on it. It jumped to 5%. Then we said, no, this doesn't look correct. Then it went to 6. Then we said, no. And now it's at 8.3 in the United States. So the question we're asking, when will it go down back to 3 and 4? I'll tell you, it's a guess right now. All the Nobel Prize winners in economics, some say it's going to continue, some say it's going to go back down. Right now, the optimism is not that great that it's going to go back down for another 6 months to a year. We've got to get control of the war. They need to stop that war as quickly as possible, and that will slow down the inflation. Because don't forget, the threat of oil over to Europe and the uncertainty of the oil, that's what's driving up oil prices primarily. Then the pandemic, we're still fighting to recover. We're not there yet. So those two negatives, those are the ones that are keeping us in this inflationary global situation. So we need to really get a handle on that war, and we need to then continue our work country by country, globally, all the world institutions, just like how they fought for COVID globally. We have to fight inflation globally. So the United States, Great Britain, all the big countries, they're doing what they can to help their people as well as to curb national the prices in their country. We've got to do our share also at home in Belize. And we've got to fight it together, World Bank, IDB, all of the institutions. But locally, I'll throw in a very important piece. Government, just like how I asked the consumers to keep tabs on your money and manage it carefully, I think government needs that same recommendation. You cannot be wasting taxpayers' money in an inflationary period. So every expenditure needs to get its bang for its buck. Is that too strong, or is that reasonable?
No, I think that's a
Reasonable,
very
yeah.
fair statement to be made. And I think it goes to what you spoke of before. We can talk about economic development, but leaders also have to ensure that they're making decisions based on what is best for the general population. Not the voters, the general population.
Indeed.
Boy, Marlene, you are on the money. When a country has 50% poverty, I've always mentioned they need to have a poverty alleviation ministry that focuses on that 50%. There's another component that Philip, Tate and I were talking about. 50% of this population is under 25 years of age. Man, we should be having youth policies through our years, trying to get those youth educated into all kinds of trades and so on, so that we could reduce the crime and to make them feel important.
Yeah.
Spend the money on the youth and you'll get your money back 5-10 years down the road.
That's right. That's a return on the investment.
Yeah.
Doc, we are so thankful that you were able to join us this morning. We can tell you that much. Great conversation, and we hope to get you back sometime again to discuss. Thank you.
I'm always willing and ready to help. This is my contribution to Belize. I have a classroom of a whole country and 2 wonderful co-hosts, and I can assure you, I tell it like it is because I think that's what the country needs. We need to not butter it up and tell it and make sure that it's understandable. So thank you, John. Thank you, Marlene. And thank you, Belize, for listening. I'm still Belize at heart. Like I show you the mango. I get the mangoes from my tree in the yard. So now only they talk about it. I got mango, I got papaya, I got coconut, I got cilantro, culantro, and what else I have back there? My wife is the farmer, and I help out a little bit. So these are from my tree. Belize, say I could do it way out of Florida, so you must could do it home.
All right, Dr. Williams, thank you. All right, so we're going to take a break. When we come back, of course, we'll be chit-chatting with folks from the Social Security Board, celebrating 41 years, 41st anniversary, and they've got giveaways when we come back. Stay with us.
Uh-oh.
I know.